I'm here in Dark Meyer, getting ready to meet up with Souce Chunk. He's been a chunkman for a while and has actually completed his whole map. And so I thought, instead of joining in on a grind he has, because he doesn't really have one anymore, that we could meet up here in a place a lot of other chunk people are not going to be able to access. But if you don't know, Source is the one who created the chunk picker map. So I'm really excited to hear from him how the development with that went, what it's been like being a part of the One Chunk clan for so long, and see if we can't get a couple of blood shards. I'm really excited. I hope you guys are too. Let's meet up with him. All right, we are here with Source Chunks, and we met up here in Dark. Is it Dark Meyer or Dark Meyer? I can always get them confused.
I've always said Dark Meyer, but who
Yeah.
knows?
I don't think I pronounce anything correctly in this game. Pretty much everything I stumble over at some point. But yeah, thank you for doing this. Thank you for meeting up with me. I really appreciate it. We're here in Dark Mare to hopefully get some blood shards, which would be really cool. I don't know if you you're an Iron Man on this account, right?
Yeah, that's right, Iron Man. I have one blood shard in here already. I think I got that from thieving. I can't remember though. I haven't
Oh,
used
nice.
it, but I would love to be able to get more, and then I can actually start using them because I feel like I want the one in the bank, and then
Yeah,
I can start using if I get duplicates from there.
yeah, yeah. I'm the same way. Like I need to make sure I always have it in case I need it, and then I never use it when I
Yeah,
do need
exactly.
it.
Like I'm that way with all games. Like they give you like potions, like I'm not using those potions. I gotta save those.
Exactly. Yeah. Same with bullets. I gotta save my
Oh
bullets as
yeah.
much as possible. Well, when did you first get involved with the chunkman style play? How did that all happen?
Yeah, so it was like a little over 5 years ago when Alex Bailey released that those first couple of videos. I think I started tuning into her stuff. I think I want to say like when the second video released, I watched the first and the second together, and I was like there for the third one when it came out live in like that would be like spring of 2019.
Yeah.
And like after the third episode, I was like, this is a really cool concept. Like I'm already watching this, but like this is so cool. I think I want to do it myself. So that's when I made this account. And it is a chunk account. It's just like a vanilla chunk account. So nothing extreme like people do these days, but it's kind of like starting like basically right after uh, Alex kind of finished her series, although we didn't know that at the time, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I started watching her stuff right at the same time. I think her third episode had either just come out before I found the first one or just like the next couple days. And I was like so hooked and so bummed when no more ever came out.
Yeah, it's a sad day. I mean, I'm happy that she's doing well, and I talk with her sometimes here and there, so I know that things are going well for her. But man,
That's
I
good.
really wish we had something special with that series, and obviously it's created this whole community. But you know, you gotta do what's best for your health sometimes, right?
Yeah, totally. Definitely don't sacrifice your health for RuneScape for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have these extreme accounts. That's debatable when it comes to them, right?
Yeah. So when did you start with the clan? When did all that happen? Were you
The
one of the
clan,
founders?
yeah. So when I first joined in like late spring 2019, clans weren't a thing yet. That didn't come out until like in old school RuneScape in general. Like that didn't come out for I want to say like 2 years or something. Yeah, I think it was like summer of 2021 when clans were released. At that point, I had been playing on this account for about 2 years, with some breaks and whatever, but 2 years since then. And at that point, um, when the clans came out, like I think day of or the day after, we made the clan. Um, and you have to make it in the Grand Exchange chunk, and there was only a couple of us that had the Grand Exchange chunk. I mean, there wasn't that many chunkers in general, but only a couple of us had the Grand Exchange. So it was like me and a couple of the mods that are currently mods for the clan, and a couple of their like main accounts. So it was like three of us basically that made the clan like just over 3 years ago now.
You've kind of watched the whole thing develop firsthand.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like I came in not at the very, very beginning, as far as like episode one of the first series. I wasn't like the first one, there, but like I've stuck with it, which I think is something that a lot of people, they come and go, but there's a couple faces you see for a long time, and uh, I don't know. I got in at the right point, I guess. I wasn't trying to do anything, but it just happened to be at the right time to kind of watch the community in general um, grow up and get as big as it has now, which is, I mean, that's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the clan is constantly full. It's at 500 almost all the time, and people are who aren't playing get kicked out to bring in new people. It's very healthy, alive clan, which is really fun.
Yeah, it's insane to look at. Like we have like 57 people online right now, and I remember like very distinctly for months and months when the clan first came out, like not even being able to have enough people online to have like a scroll bar on the side. Like however many can fit on the screen without a scroll bar is like that's the maximum we ever had. And it was exciting when it got to the point where it started scrolling a little bit. And that's when there was like 100 people in the clan total, only some of them online at any
Yeah,
given time. So it's crazy thinking that like we have to do like purges every couple of weeks just to let new people in that keep showing up every week.
yeah. When did the chunk picker? What's the timeline on that? When did you start the development on that?
So it kind of started it didn't start directly as working on the chunk picker. So uh, when I first joined the community, by that point there was already a website that did chunk picking for people. It was the first chunk picker, which is why my chunk picker is the chunk picker V2. Um, and it wasn't made by me; it was already something that existed. And I think Alex shows it in episode 3, her using it. But when I joined the community, I'm from a technical background, and I wanted to add something to of value to the community. And what I did was I took the Chunk Picker V1 and I wanted to add a Roll 2 button, which didn't exist back then. And I don't know if I was the first person to be doing Roll 2 Pick 1, but I was one of the first to be doing it, and I was the one who added it as another button to the chunk picker uh, V1. And after I did that, that was like right after I joined, like within a month of me joining. After I did that, I kind of wanted to see if I could like replicate the chunk picker myself and see if I could make it better in any ways, just as like a personal project that would be like a good challenge for me, I guess.
Yep.
And I ended up like releasing the beta version of it with like the bare bones in like September of that same year. So this is like almost 5 years ago at this point. Um, and it had like none of the features that you can like think of now when you think of the chunk picker, except for like
Yeah.
the barest. Like the map was there, the buttons kind of looked the same. It had like the three-letter map codes at the top and whatever that are pretty distinct these days, but like nothing was like any bit how it is now. It's been a long process since then.
Yeah. Yeah. It is so impressive. Every time I use it, it makes me feel dumb because it is so well made. Every time I make a mistake, I'm like, oh, there's something wrong with this. Then I find out that it's me. I'm the thing that's wrong with it. It's constantly user error.
Yeah, I feel like part of that is definitely like from a development point of view, it's tricky to design a website or an app that is like cuts out all of the error from the user. Like the better you are at that, the more intuitive your app feels. And as someone who is from a technical background, so I'm good at being able to like code the stuff that to make it work, but I'm less good at the like user interface design. So like being able to make it look good and feel good and be intuitive. That's something that like I'm jealous of people that are good at that because there's so many features on the chunk picker that are just unused or underused because it's like people have no idea that it's there. And if I could design like an interface that is intuitive to it, it may be it'd be used more, but it's tricky fitting all the little things you need into like one screen, especially when you don't have like a normal website where you're scrolling up and down and you can fit stuff kind of below the fold as they call it, but
Mm.
only having the one screen because you're on the map view the entire time, it's tricky fitting all of it in there and also being intuitive. So that you're not the only one who's dumb sometimes.
What is one of the things I wanted to ask you was, what is a common question that you get that you like people are like, oh, can you do this or can you add this that you've already done or that you've already solved?
For a while there was it's not like what have I already solved, but for a while there was um like an iconic question almost that people would ask every time they joined because Lumbridge is a pretty popular starting point, obviously. Less so these days, but especially a couple years ago, it was like everyone started there basically, and everyone had the question about, oh, it's giving me a task for cooking, but I don't know how to cook in this, and we're like, yeah, it's because you have the cows in the corner. You can't get to
Mm.
the cows, but you have to backlog it because you can't get there. And I mean, recently we've fixed that actually because of the chunk sections, which let you kind of tell the website what parts of a chunk you have, which is it's been a godsend. But like that was a question that like 50 people were answering like every single day because it was just like such a common question that we were like we need to have like a command for it in the Discord or on the in the clan chat, because it gets asked every single day. I mean, um, but I don't know. Like as far as like what are people asking that is already a feature? Usually it's just like people don't know about the search feature and they're like, how do I have access to this thing? And it's like, well, you can check like we have abilities to let you check. You can check like how you have access to that item or that NPC or whatever. But usually people are pretty good about figuring stuff out, or they'll like ask me a question and then like 5 minutes later they'll send me another message before I even get back to them. They're like, wait, I figured it out. Never mind.
So is there a feature that you that is on the chunk picker that you feel like people don't know about other than the search feature? Something that you would like people to know or use more?
There's like there's literally like 100 features probably. Yeah, I think the feature that like the least people know about, which is partially because I don't like advertise it anywhere really, is the shift left click feature, which is you can if you have a chunk that is marked as rollable, rather than like left clicking it once to mark it as unlocked and then left clicking it again to lock it, you can just shift and left click on it and it goes straight to locked again, which I mean, it's not that big a deal, but it's nice to not have to like cycle through every chunk to mark it as unlocked and then locked again. It's like tiny little things like that. And it's like, why did I add that? And it's like, well, someone asked for it a while ago, and I said, yeah, that sounds easy enough to add. So just like add it while I'm here. It's easy enough, and now it's like a thing that exists that almost nobody knows about. But
Yeah,
like,
that
there's a million other features that are like useful, but not that well known. This one is like barely useful, but it's like probably like 15 people know about it maybe.
yeah, I'm gonna use that all the time. I had no idea about that. That's so good. The because I mean with my account I'm constantly moving and unlocking locking chunks back and forth, and so I'm triple clicking everything constantly.
Yeah, I I haven't watched your whole series, but from the first episode, I noticed like in the intro or even in the rules episode, you like go to like relock some chunks and you unlock all of them accidentally, and then you do a quick edit to hide that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, if he knew about this feature, he'd be all good.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't sure if anyone would notice that, but it makes sense that you would.
Whenever the chunk figure comes on screen, I'm like, all right, what's going on here? Like I like hyper focus on it. It's like I have to turn that off, otherwise I'm just like always like I pull out my keyboard and I'm like, actually, you should have done this in this instance, and you could have done this feature. I need to stop myself.
Yeah. Yeah, don't watch my series. I might
At
frustrate
all?
you.
Okay.
Yeah, the first few episodes. So I at one point I put a willow shield as a task and did not know how to get rid of it for so long. And so it was a task in every chunk I rolled for like 15 chunks or something like that.
That's fine. I mean, there's been so many chunk series at this point. It's like I've gotten over myself of like having to correct people. Like I used to like well I used to feel like I needed to watch every like a chunk account that was out there, and
Yeah.
then I'd be like watching them, and like if I see something wrong, I need to like comment. I need to correct it. And I've gotten better at resisting that urge, and like I'll be like typing something out and you'd be like, no, it's not worth it. Like delete, delete, delete. Like I don't need to. I'll just say like nice video.
Yeah. So ha, what percentage of people would you say continue to play past like their first chunk account? I don't know if you have the stats for that or anything, but because I've seen a bunch of series that start and never have an episode 2 or never have an episode 3.
Oh yeah, I don't know when it comes to YouTube series. I feel like a lot of I don't know. I feel like my subscription box is full of people that I've subscribed to, and a lot of them are dead channels now. But I feel like there's not too many that are like only one or two episodes. Usually it's like you get like four or five in, like three, four, five, and then if you make it past that, you're usually good to go into like the 20s. But if you like, there's a lot of people that will fall at that hurdle depending on kind of what rules your account has, especially with like extreme rules. If you're in a chunk that's got a lot of stuff in it, you can usually get the first couple episodes and have like lots to be doing still, and still it's still novel and interesting. But by the time you're getting to like episode 4, 5, 6, that kind of range, you're running out of stuff to do that's new and novel, and
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of stuck in the grind, like as an extreme or a supreme. And if you're if you're trying to make content out of that, you need to be smart in the way you're doing it. Otherwise, it just is the same thing every episode. Basically, like, oh, here I am mining still. Like I got 5 more levels this episode. I'll see you next week. Like,
Yeah.
it takes I think something special to have a rule set like that and still make it interesting for your audience, and therefore like appealing for you to continue. And if you're doing it based on a series, having that appeal to continue for your audience is like most of the driving factor behind doing the account in general,
Yeah.
which I think is a trap for a lot of people.
Were you aware of Limpwort before his series came out? I don't know how active he was in the community at that time, but
He was like silent. I mean, he's got his own community, and he's kind of always been like that,
yeah.
where like I don't even know if he's part of like the main chunk Discord, honestly.
Mm.
Like he has his own Discord, he has his own like friends chat. I don't think he has a clan. Um, but he kind of keeps to himself for the most part. I knew about him once he put out his series, obviously. I mean, at that point, who didn't? He
Yeah.
was the biggest thing since Alex's original series. So, but no, I mean, I don't think anyone knew about it besides like his personal friends that he already had that were cheering him on in that first episode or whatever, because he didn't advertise it anywhere. He wasn't in like our friends chat back then because it would have been before the clan, and he wasn't in the Discord or anything. So I mean, he basically like did most of the first chunk before he even released the first episode, and I think he was just doing it by himself, which relates back to the last point I was saying about having motivation for your audience. He's clearly someone that would be doing this even if he didn't have the audience because he waited like a full year to release his first video, and he's like one of the strongest and biggest chunk series now. So clearly he's doing it for reasons that are not like motivated by like how the last video did, the reception on it, and like that pushes him forward.
Yeah. What was it? Did the extreme rule set kind of, I don't know what the right way to say this is, but like shake up the community? Was it exciting? Were people like annoyed about it?
I think it's at this point it's undeniably had like a huge impact on the community, but when it first came out, it was definitely, I mean, it was very popular, but I think it was viewed by a lot of people that had chunk accounts at that point as I don't know. I think for some people it may have been a little bit demotivating to see like, oh, we're not we're doing these chunk accounts, but they're not even like doing the whole chunk really. Like you don't really think about like the exceptions that you're making on your account until you see someone do the same thing without those exceptions. For me personally, it was like I'm doing this account because I'm enjoying this, and I looking at the extreme rules, I would never do that. So it doesn't for me it doesn't invalidate my experience at all because I first of all I'm enjoying this, so I don't need something outside of that to validate that, but also I wouldn't be doing an extreme account anyway, so it's either doing the vanilla rules or it's not doing it at all, and obviously I'd rather be doing it. So um, I don't feel like anything from that standpoint. But it's in terms of like these days, I mean, I feel like the default is almost the extreme rule set because it's become so popular with creators and new people join, and it's like the default for them is the extreme rather than the vanilla rule set, which is definitely a big change from a couple years ago, where it used to be that vanilla was the kind of default that someone would go into it looking at, and if there was an extreme, it was the exception rather than the other way around, like it is now.
Yeah. Do you think that's a big part of why people don't start in Lumbridge anymore?
That's interesting. I mean, Lumbridge is a horrible chunk for extremes. There's also a lot of bad chunks out there that are not Lumbridge for extremes, like anything with like mining or magic or smithing, like all those are bad chunks. And there's tons of skill capes out there.
The
Um,
monastery?
oh, the monastery. That I think I've seen someone who started there as an extreme on Reddit, and I wish them luck. I don't know how they're gonna survive. Um, no, it's interesting though, because when I started my account, there was no thought to not start in Lumbridge. Like that wasn't even that was like literally not a thought that crossed my mind. Not as like a personal preference, but like I didn't even consider that starting in not Lumbridge would be like possible. I don't know how to describe it. Like no one was starting anywhere except for Lumbridge at the beginning, and it's like obviously pretty quickly that turned into people starting in all sorts of places. But at the beginning, it was not something that anyone was doing. But I imagine that Extreme certainly pushed that to be more popular. I don't know if it is the reason that people started doing it. I can't remember that, but I definitely think that people do it more nowadays because it's become more widely accepted since extreme rules like basically screw you if you start in Umbridge.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's the woodcutting cape and the defense cape, right?
Yeah, those are the big things. Obviously, it's like small things like you have to get slightly higher fletching level and whatever, but the skill capes are what kills you. Like if you do like an extreme, if you do like a custom extreme where it's extreme rules minus skill capes, which is a pretty popular rule set, Lumbridge is a little bit worse than on vanilla, but otherwise you're kind of free within a couple weeks usually,
Mm.
which is pretty easy, and you have a decent amount of variety, so it's not the worst thing ever. But the skill capes are the killer in Lumbridge.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about Buzz and how all that if that was a similar reaction. But maybe before we get into that, I was wondering if you could maybe break down the difference between vanilla, extreme, and supreme.
Yeah, sure. So I think extreme, especially since it's the baseline for today, seemingly, I think is a good place to start. So looking at extreme rules, it's kind of doing everything that you have to do in a chunk that is kind of relevant to that specific chunk. So um, if you're able to get logs within a chunk, or you're able to train wood cutting, then you have to chop the highest level tree. If you with those logs that you cut, you have to be able to fletch them into like the highest level thing that you can do. If there's any skill capes in that chunk, you need to get the highest level to get those skill capes. If you have a boss in your chunks, you have to get all the full collection log from that boss. It's like the what you would think of as like everything within the chunk that is like relevant to that. In comparison, vanilla rules is it's somewhat arbitrary because of the way it was kind of created, and the creator of that, which is Alex, her series, creating that. But it's basically extreme, except instead of the big ones are skill capes aren't required, and that's like, for a somewhat arbitrary reason of just it would be unreasonable to expect that for the kind of person that's doing the rule set. And the other main one is instead of having to like fletch the highest level thing with a U log or smith the highest level thing with an adamant bar, it's you only have to smith the lowest level thing. So you think about it rather than like the lowest level, think about it as being like you have to process every item with all the skills that you can process it with, but you only have to process it at in any way. So processing an adamant bar in any way, the easiest way is going to be just doing it into an adamant dagger at the lowest level rather than having to worry about like doing an extra like 18 levels to get to an adamant plate body. Um, and I guess also no collection logs. So you still have to do bosses if they drop things that would affect your other chunk tasks like best in slot armor or a skilling task or something like that, but you don't have to grind for pets or jars or miscellaneous stuff like that that isn't relevant for your tasks.
Yeah.
And then in comparison, Supreme is extreme but harder and taking stuff that is like non-chunk specific and adding that in. So extremes don't need to get skilling pets, but supremes do need to get skilling pets. That's the big one because extremes view that as passive things that you technically can actively work towards, but they're not specific to any individual chunk. So they kind of just happen over time. They're not something that you intentionally grind for. But Supremes disagree, and they grind for it within their chunks. They also grind out like the entirety of all the drop tables that they can within their chunks. Every monster, you need to get every single drop, every quantity of that drop, etc. So Supremes basically take it to the highest level and say, what is like literally everything I can possibly do within my chunk, versus extremes will take it to the quite high level of what is everything that's specific to this chunk that I can do without leaving this chunk. And vanillas are lower, kind of like what are like the minimum things that I can do within this chunk without leaving this chunk while still like across the board doing all the things to some degree, basically.
And so Buzz is the one who started the supreme rule set, right?
That's correct. He was the first one.
Yeah. And how was that reception similar to Limpwort, or was it different? I don't know if you remember how the community reacted
Yeah,
at the time.
I'm trying to remember. I mean, he came out with his after Limpert was doing his for a bit. I don't remember how long in between like his first versus Limpert's first episode was, but I think at that point people were just like excited, but also kind of like laughing at the existence of it. I mean, people kind of thought that what he was doing was like basically a novelty account. Like he wasn't gonna actually stick with it. Not because anyone necessarily doubted his ability, but just because it seemed like a ridiculous premise in the first place. Like, oh, you're gonna sit there until you get all the skilling pets. Like, unless he gets really lucky, he's just like screwed. Basically, he's gonna be there for literally years. So people assumed that it was just like a funny account that would eventually go away. I mean, he stuck with it, but I wouldn't say it's caught on in the same popularity that Extreme has.
Yeah. Yeah, getting the skilling pets is like such an unknown quantity when you're doing it. It could be, every tree you chop could be the squirrel, but it's probably not.
Yeah, I mean, it like having to start with woodcutting pet and farming pet and thieving pet. I think those are all the ones he had all in one chunk. It's like, I mean, especially with your only farming option being a single tree patch that you have to rake to even start planting stuff, and your only source of seeds are from like random drops from a bird nest. Like it sounds like you're trying to make an account that is like funny as a joke,
Yeah.
but he like stuck with it. I mean, he's still doing it now. So like props to him, props to anyone that does do Supreme and sticks with it. But I mean, it is made at least from the outside to feel like a joke.
And you have a series on YouTube, the Ideal Chunk, right?
Yeah, it's not the most known. I'm definitely one of the smaller creators for YouTube, but yeah, so that account is a vanilla account with a bit of a twist in terms of uh, I pick the specific chunks that I unlock and the order I unlock them in, kind of like how Happy does it, um, but vanilla and not Ultimate Iron Man.
And how has that been for you? How's because so you did this one, which was roll two, pick one, right? Source chunk, and then
Yeah, so this one is the one from 5 years ago. Roll two, pick one, vanilla rules.
what have you noticed between the two accounts? What was the biggest difference?
I think the biggest difference is with the ideal one chunk man. You can get real wacky with like your routing and how you pick stuff versus with roll two pick one you have some slight influence on what you do, but basically you can delay bad chunks from happening, but you can't prevent them from happening. Versus when you're picking your chunks individually one by one, you can forever ignore bad chunks. Like if you don't want the Dwarven Mine chunk, you don't have to ever get it, which is an interesting thing because for some people, I think that would be a nice advantage to have. But I know a lot of people have explicitly said they like the the randomness of having no idea what's coming next. I know like some people even say like they don't look at chunks that are near them. I think you're talking to Ordo and he said that.
Yeah.
Um, like they don't look at the chunks near them. They just like experience the chunk like in real time as they're doing it, and then they roll, and it's basically a complete surprise to them. So I know for them that wouldn't be enjoyable to pick your own chunks, but for some people it is interesting. Like I kind of viewed it as more of a puzzle versus the this account with the roll two pick one has is like not is not a puzzle at all. It's just kind of fun snowflake gameplay versus the ideal account was like a little bit of snowflake gameplay, but mostly just like what's this cool puzzle that I can do? How can I route this to get around these weird areas? And sure, there's some grinding in the middle of it, but for the most part, I'm trying to like not do the grinding and route in a way that I can like get cool stuff without doing any grinds. So in that way, it's like a very easy account, but the hard part is like the the conceptual like theory crafting and thinking rather than the game playing and grinding like most chunk accounts are.
Yeah, because you're having to plan like six chunks ahead of like, oh, I need to get here. Which way is gonna get me there fastest, but also prepare me so I'm not there forever.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if there's a big grind that I have to do, what's the best way I can prepare for it? You can get some good training methods before you go in. If you route correctly, you can make it so that the rare drop that you would have to get in the chunk is from an easier monster earlier on or whatever. Like it's really interesting if you like that sort of thing to kind of puzzle your way through like what would be the best way to do that, or what's the best way that you can think of in a limited amount of time, you know?
Yeah. Is it a series you're still working on? I know your last video came out a while ago.
Yeah, it's not dead, but I feel like it ended on a pretty good note where it is right now, and it's definitely not like um, gone forever necessarily, but I, given the amount of time that I have to spend towards this kind of stuff, it's something that I would need motivation to do something specific to want to pick it up again, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you had mentioned that you have a background in tech. Is programming your background? What do you do for a job, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, I don't mind. So I am a software engineer by day, I guess. I work in very similar stuff to the making the chunk picker. I do web development. That's something I've been doing since I left college and something I was doing in college as well. Um, so that's why kind of my first instinct when coming to the community was I want to make a cool website because it's like I'm already doing that for my job. It's something that I really enjoy doing. And it's something that I have the skills for. So it's not like I need to necessarily learn a whole new set of skills to want to do this thing for a community that I just joined like a month ago, you know?
Yeah. What programs do you write in, or languages do you write in?
So yeah, so languages, I'm doing mostly front end programming for websites, which is basically all in JavaScript. There's some libraries and uh, some kind of bigger stuff that is on top of the JavaScript. Like I use React pretty regularly for my job, but and that's just like a kind of library for JavaScript. But most of my work is just in normal JavaScript. Like the chunk picker is written in normal vanilla JavaScript with a little bit of jQuery on top, which is another library just for easy manipulation of the screen. And that's like mainly my background when it comes to stuff that isn't like stuff I learned in school, stuff that I actually use on a day-to-day basis. It's all JavaScript.
Yeah. So going back to when you were creating the chunk picker, did you do it chunk by chunk? Did you do like item by item? What was the conception of connecting everything together?
So that kind of came slowly at first. Like the beta version of the chunk picker that came out in September of 2019 was like incredibly bare bones. Like I said, it had the three letter map code at the top. That's your unique identifier. It had, being able to log into your map to edit it. It had the ability to pan and zoom around the map like you would on Google Maps or whatever. But it didn't have any knowledge of what any chunk was. It just viewed them all as squares that you could click on to unlock, and you could roll them, and it would tell you what square you rolled, but it had no knowledge of what was going on inside each chunk. Just that this is the chunk that is on row 10, column 7, or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, versus obviously at this point, the I think the biggest appeal of the chunk picker is the automated tasks that get generated for you when you roll a new chunk, and that's not something that came around for like quite a bit because uh, it was like over a year, no, around a year after it was released in beta, I'd say like 1 year later, we were trying to figure out a way to basically give information on each chunk so that there would be like some relevant stuff so you wouldn't have to explore it yourself because before the website you would get a new chunk and you would just walk around and like talk to all the NPCs and like, oh, what are these monsters here? And you're like, oh, I didn't know there was a guard in this chunk. Like now I have a big grind for that. Like you had no idea until you rolled it and started walking around in it. And we wanted to. The idea was, we, as a community, we wanted to make it so that there was like a database of that information that people had found. So like everyone starts in the lumberage chunk, so they kind of know, but like not everyone has whatever, like the chunk north of it, like the Groats Farm chunk. So, well, it's like, well, I have it, so I'll start writing down what's in here, so that if people ask, I can just like link them to like this note that I took with all the stuff and all the NPCs, all the monsters, whatever. And we like started doing that as a community. I had like a big, I think it was like a 200 page like Google Doc or something, and I added a bunch of editors to it, and we just like started adding information manually. Like, oh, I have this chunk, I'll start adding the information for it, and like we'll like recruit people who are like starting in weird spots at that point. Like, oh, tell us what's in your chunk, because we don't have it yet. Because I didn't have like a main account or anything really, so at that point it was just like collecting stuff that I had rolled already and collecting stuff that other people had rolled or started in. And then eventually, like a couple months after that, there was a big update with the wiki, like the old Runescape wiki, and they like just then, this is like a bit over 4 years ago, or a bit less than 4 years ago. Yeah, a bit less than 4 years ago. They added more specific information on like exactly where stuff spawns. They added information of the exact tile that NPCs are spawning on, that monsters spawned on, that items spawned on. They added information of exactly what tile objects were on. So you could look up, that's being able to go to a page and click, let's say you want to look at, well, we're killing Firewatch Sentinel. So click on Firewatch Sentinel and you scroll down to locations on the page, and you can click on the little like map pin icon next to it, and it'll show you on like a world map where exactly each of the monsters is located. That wasn't a thing like 4 years ago, but once they added that, like immediately I got the idea of like, we've been doing this thing where we like manually write down like all the information, but what if we could just like, I don't know, like download the wiki somehow and then use the data that it has to basically automate the task that we're trying to do and automate creating this list of things that's in each chunk. And I got in contact with one of the admins over on the wiki, and like he helped me figure out kind of the information that I would need to access that information, to access that data. And from there, it was just like kind of going through it, and I would basically download the data, and then we filter through it for like, is this important? Do we need this? For like for a while, it was like every chunk has like 1 million different like scenery objects in it, and only like 5% of them are useful. So it's like making a list of only the interactable scenery objects, and from there making a list of non-interactable scenery objects that are still useful and relevant, like water fountains and wells and stuff like that aren't left click usable but have the use of right clicking it. And so like going through all that stuff, and it's like, okay, now we have the information for every chunk. We have the data of what is inside of it. And I literally hadn't thought about it before, but one day, like not that far after that, I was like, oh, we have the information for everything in the chunk. Like we hypothetically should know if you have a knife in your chunks, either from a spawn or a monster drop or a shop. And we hypothetically know if you have like an axe in your chunks and like a yew tree in your chunks. Wouldn't it hypothetically be possible to like figure out like if you can chop that yew tree based on the items that you have? And wouldn't it be possible to figure out like if you can fletch that yew log into something, if you have a knife or not? And from there, it kind of just like spiraled into what we have today, slowly, but kind of like it was like February of 2021 where the beta of the chunk test came out, and that side panel with your current tasks. And when it came out, it was only skill task and best in slot task. It was no quest or diary ones, but just with that, like that's when things started going like crazy when it came to how we all look at like a chunk account now.
Yeah, the primary training method aspect of it is so clean. Like it's so impressive every time. It's really difficult for me for my account, um, because
Yeah.
I go through places, pick stuff up, and then close it off. So it makes it a little complicated, but it is so genius. It's like I'm constantly impressed by it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been like a long process. Like when it started out, there was like 1 million things wrong with it, and then like every day you go in and like check off like 10 things that you're fixing, and it's like, well, there's still like 990,000 or whatever more to fix because like there's so many, sorry,
No,
so
you're good.
many edge cases with like specifically like, oh, this training method doesn't work unless you have this item and that item, and it's like, well, we got to fix that now. You got to add a new thing to handle that or whatever. And just like eventually it came along, and at some point, I don't know when, but at some point, it became good enough that people viewed it as like fact, basically. Like what's on the website is what I have to do. Versus at some point before that, it was okay. What I have to do is what I figure out that I have to do. And the website is, yeah, it's trying to like mimic that and whatever. But at some point, people stopped trying to figure out what they had to do for themselves because it was like widely viewed that the website became that fact. And for a while, that really frustrated me because the website was not good enough to be like to be like the definition of tasks for everyone.
Yeah.
Um, but at this point, it's quite good. So I'm less upset when people don't do that. But when the task first came out, people started switching over, and it was like frustrating because like I need you to tell me when I'm wrong, not the other way around. You know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I know I definitely from my perspective, I've only been using it for about 3 months now, 4 months now. Um, but I've gotten to the point where I just assume that I'm wrong when I disagree with it. I'm like, I've been
Yeah.
wrong every time. So I was like, I must just be wrong again.
It's like there's still bugs being discovered like every day. Like I have like a system for bug reporting, and I have people like DMing me on Discord or posting in the Chunk Rec Tech channel in the Discord server that we have like every day with something that's wrong basically. And it's like most of the time, well, I won't say most of the time, like half the time, like they're right too. Like it is something wrong that I have to fix. Usually it's like, oh, I misspelled this item, so it's not picking it up correctly, or I didn't capitalize it correctly, or oh, I listed the wrong thing when I was copy and pasting and I forgot to go back and change it. Um, so like there's still things being changed like multiple times every single week, but I mean, if you do figure out that you've been wrong every time you think you found something, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but there people are still finding stuff out there. I'll tell you that much. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I think I get wrong a lot with my style of play. If I think because I have two accounts. I have the shifting chunks, and then I'm playing a supreme on the Deadman world 345,
Hmm.
and that one is so easy to use for me because I'm not changing anything. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I can like compare it to all the time I've spent in the one chunk. But moving from chunk to chunk, I get things like the thief thug thing, where I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is very clearly just a mistake. There's a thief here. I see it. This says thug. There's no way that I'm wrong about this. And so I sent you a message on Discord, and I really quickly figured out what I was doing wrong.
Yeah, it's like I've had a lot of experience like just figuring out what's wrong. Like I feel like I, I I I really know when someone messages me and they say something's wrong, I know almost immediately what to check, and
Mm.
I'll know right away if I'm right or they're right. when I check that thing that I know immediately. And it's like as soon as I checked yours, I was like, yep, looks like it's another chunk. And but it's like from your perspective, the way you're unlocking chunks, like it doesn't show up until you unlock that new one. So it's like, of course it's in this chunk because I just unlocked this chunk. And before this, it wasn't there. So clearly it's in this chunk, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because it
It's like you're
was,
using it in a way that's like it's like not the intended way to use it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with you using it, but like it's built for a purpose, and the purpose that you're using it for is like a slight variation of that. So that's where you can get into like tricky situations where it can trick you into thinking one thing when it's actually like not correct technically.
yeah. Yeah, we're kind of, me and the chunk picker are kind of at odds a lot of the time. Speaking of like unique accounts, are there other accounts that excite you that you think are cool, that are different?
Well, so I have to mention inspiration for my second chunk account that is in the idea of one chunk man. So my inspiration for that was a guy named Pelipper that did an account very similar to that, where he picked his own chunks rather than rolling them randomly. And at the time, and I think even still now, that's a quite unique concept that probably only like 5 or 10 people total have ever done. And I mean, for good reason, it's a very different kind of gameplay. But uh, shout out to Pelipper for that. He has long since not played, but um, his series was a really good inspiration, and uh, I still think it's a very cool way to play, and that's why I really enjoy watching Hapri because Hapri has continued doing that, except with an extreme as an Ultimate Iron Man, and I think it really lends itself to his rules too, and he's a great presenter of that. So I really like what he's doing and what Pelipper did. Um, and I'm also a big fan of Ectograss. I don't know if you've watched her stuff, but she is kind of similar to what you do in the sense that she is only in a chunk for a certain amount of time. But for her, instead of having 1 hour to do a chunk and then you move on to the next chunk, she has 1 hour per task. And whenever she checks off a task, like a chunk task on the website, then it resets her timer back to 1 hour again. So she has to kind of strategically figure out what order she's going to do her tasks in and what she wants to spend time doing to work towards those goals. Or if she has like a pretty free chunk, she will like work towards what she think might come next in the chunks. So like preparing for it when all she has to do is like kill one monster or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a really cool series, and I hope she keeps on making it because yeah, I've really been enjoying it so far. And it's definitely, I think, one of the most unique concepts out there, and she doesn't get enough views, so
Yeah,
everyone should go watch her.
that sounds really cool. It sounds very stressful. I know. Like for me, I'm just in the chunk for an hour, and that I'm always like pretty tense about. I can't imagine trying to fit a task in that hour and checking things off that way.
Yeah, it helps. She has tailored the rule set so it lends itself to being able to do that. Um, like she has it. I think it's pretty vanilla rules, which is definitely still hard when you're doing it timed like this. But she also has a couple additional rules, like killing one of every new monster that she unlocks, and like so those tasks usually help as ways to there's still like things you have to do, unique things in a chunk, but they help you buffer out things because you're never going to take 1 hour to kill a unique monster. So you could
Yeah.
spend like 55 minutes doing something to work towards, I don't know, let's say you have like a 60 woodcutting grind, like spend 55 minutes working towards that, and then the last 5 minutes you go kill the one thing that you need to or whatever. So that helps. And then she does like I forget exactly. She does like every time she rolls, she either does like a roll to pick one, so she has some choice and influence towards what she gets, or she picks her chunk specifically. I think she like goes back and forth. Like one she does one, and the next one she does the other one. So being able to do that can kind of help set you up, and there's still some randomness there that you can get screwed. So I'm looking forward to the continuation of that series. It's been really enjoyable so far.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Is there any projects that you're working on for the chunk picker currently? Anything that you're trying to get figured out?
It's like I've kind of for like 6 months now, I'd say I've been kind of in a point where I feel like the chunk picker is almost done, basically. Like there's definitely still more that could be done on it, but it feels mostly what you'd call like feature complete. Um, there is some stuff that I still have like on a list uh, of like things that I want to work on eventually, and the main one of those that I want to get working is at some point before I call it done is the ability to look at someone else's map and see it be updated in real time as they're like rolling a chunk or unlocking it or
Mm.
whatever. Because right now it's kind of like whenever you load someone's map, it loads whatever state it was in when you first loaded it. But if they change it while you still have the map open, it won't reflect those changes. And being able to look at someone's map and see what they roll in basically real time, I think would be a nice feature to have, and it'd also be nice for the couple of group Iron Man chunk accounts that are out there and share a map, so they don't have to worry about like messing up each other by both working on the map at the same time. Usually, what they have to do now is like only one of them will work on it because if they both work on it together, then there's a chance that you could overwrite what your partner did a minute ago on the map if they still have it open and you opened it before they changed it or whatever. So that would be like a nice thing to have. I think that's the one big feature that I have that's left to develop, and I'm always adding like little features here and there. Like I don't know, like a month ago or something, I added a feature that Josh isn't gaming asked for. He asked for like a meme grind limiter to like limit the level that you'd have to get in a skill as like a specific input rather than just backlogging tasks. So
Yeah.
it's like, sure, I can add that. That's easy enough. It's like people always have ideas of what to add. And I'm usually pretty okay with adding them if I think it is like a positive addition to the feature set of the website and isn't just gonna either go unused or add bloat to it or doesn't apply to most people. So it's like always adding more stuff, just little stuff though.
Yeah. I don't know how many people this would even be useful for. You were talking about updating it in real time, the chunk map, which I think would be really cool. Is there a way that it could not update until you're ready to push out? So, like for me, my account, I have, I think, 12 episodes ahead, edited, ready to go. But so my map, if people check it, it will, they'll see where I'm at. I'm deep wild in the series, but in Varrock on the map.
That would be interesting. I mean, like a way to have like an editing mode of the map and then you can like publish it basically
Yeah.
to like the live version. That would be interesting actually. I've never thought about that because what I've always done is like for my series, I had the public facing map and I had like the personal map. So I had two maps that were basically replicas of each other for the
Mm.
rules and for the chunks unlocked and everything. But when like after like when an episode releases, they're basically in line with each other. But then before like between that and when the next episode would release, I would have the public facing map would stay the same, but then my other map, which is just like my testing around map, is the map that I'm actually unlocking chunks on, that I'm actually checking tasks off on. And then when I release the next episode, then I go and update the public facing map real quick so that if people do check on it, it's in line with whatever like the most current episode is. But that definitely feels like a hacky solution compared to what you were suggesting with being able to like publish a map or and keep changes private until you publish them. It's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how many people would find it useful. I know that was something that I was thinking about the other day of like, oh, I don't know if people check this, but it definitely has a lot of spoilers.
Yeah, I'd say I don't know how many people check it either. Like as an average like YouTube viewer who likes watching chunk accounts, do you go and look at the chunk map, or do you just kind of take in what's being shown to you on screen and you enjoy it, but you don't go like seeking further information necessarily? I wonder. I don't have any statistics on that, but I would be interested to know because I'm sure that anyone who does like a chunk series on YouTube and who doesn't stream that progress would probably be interested in something like this.
Yeah, I know as a viewer of other series, I don't think I've ever gone out of my way to check personally. I have checked other people's like in the clan chat, people talking about their stuff or grinds they have or stuff like that. That's when I'll check other people's maps. But typically, if I'm watching, I probably wouldn't check.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way. I'd only check someone's map if they were saying something on like in a video and I had to correct them on it or something and be
Yeah,
like, actually, I can see on your map that you're doing this. Like, oh God. But no, I feel like as a viewer, I wouldn't do that often
yeah,
because usually people present it pretty well on their screen, and even without like thinking about spoilers, I just feel like in general, I don't see a reason to like go digging on their map unless there's something specific that I'm doing. Like I know people like for Limpward, he uses like the old Chunk Picker V1 map, but there is a map like a Chunk Picker V2 map that exists for his progress, and I
mm,
know a lot of his viewers go digging on that map to help him like theory craft what the best way to do certain grinds are, or they like to like do a bunch of like mock rolls to see where he might roll next or whatever. So, but as far as like an average series, I don't know how many people actually go in and do that kind of stuff, or if it's just kind of you take it as the entertainment that the videos are, but you don't like go digging necessarily. I'm not
yeah,
sure.
yeah. You'd have to be really into it to do that, I think. So the wiki you had mentioned earlier was a big help in developing the the functionality of the site. How do you think that you could make a similar thing for say World of Warcraft or another MMO that doesn't have such a robust wiki?
I think if you don't have something like the wiki or the ability to collect that information, because I think most of that information came not from the wiki itself as the source, but as a partnership between the wiki and Runelight. That's what the wiki has gotten so much better in the past, however many years it's been since Runelight started working with them, as far as the accuracy of like the drop rates because of the like what they call the drop rate project, where they collect all of the drop rates from people's loot as they kill stuff, and they have the plugin enabled, and like the specific information that you have on where things spawn and all of that. It's like without the Runelight and the wiki coordinating together, or if you're doing it on another game, not even MMO, just another game, it would be difficult if you don't have that information because then you're stuck with what we were going to do, which is, well, you need to enter all that information manually, you know? So, like, there's already a lot of manual information you need to enter for creating all the tasks. Like, there's not really a good automated way to enter like, the specific fields that you need to create like a cut a U log task. Like you can kind of maybe generate like the basic information for it, but you need to fill out some specifics on like what is the exact object name that you need to have in your chunks, what is the item name that you need to have. Um, but if on top of that you also have to fill in all the information for the actual chunk data itself, as far as like what is in each chunk, or if you're doing something that's not chunk related, if you're doing like regions or whatever, like what information is in each chunk, what NPCs, what monsters, whatever, you'd have to collect that all yourself. And that is, I mean, it's something you can definitely do, especially if you have a community that gets behind this. You can do a lot of crowdsourcing, but having the wiki have that information already like aggregated from the community was like invaluable when it came to the progress. Like at this point, like 4 years after starting on this project, as far as starting on the chunk task side of it, I think probably at this point we'd have a pretty good database of information across all the chunks. That like we were doing a good job crowdsourcing that between like 10 or 15 people maybe helping, but I mean, it would be a lot slower to progress, and you kind of need that crowdsourcing if you're not going to have some sort of aggregated data source like the wiki, because otherwise you're just doing it all yourself. And even the most motivated person, if you have a decent sized game like RuneScape, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of niche things. There's a lot of small little things that you don't check when you're checking it yourself. And having someone to double check you or multiple people to do it with you so you don't get demotivated is it's very helpful, especially if you don't have that wiki source like we had.
Yeah. Do you have kind of a team working on it with you? Or are you mostly doing it by yourself?
So it's for the most part a solo project. I've had people kind of come in and help on specific things that I've asked help on. So when we were doing the kind of crowdsourcing of the data in each chunk, like the monsters, the NPCs, the objects in each chunk, that was something that I asked people to help with before we switched to doing it on just via the wiki itself. And when I was recently, like a year ago, almost now, yeah, almost a year ago, last fall, I asked for people to help when I wanted to make the chunk sections where you're able to tell the website like what individual like parts of a singular chunk you have access to and what parts of that chunk you don't have access to. I asked for people to help with um, basically I had drawn lines on where I thought each chunk kind of split into parts, and then I was asking people to take the the data that I had for the full chunk and basically manually separate it into which parts go into which section of the chunk. So that was very helpful having like I think I had like 5 or 6 people helping with that. So shout out to all of them. You guys were very helpful with that, and we eventually got that out once I worked some other things out. But for the most part, it's just me on a day-to-day basis. It's just me when it comes to receiving bug reports and fixing those and working on big features and releases. The only person who's there as a regular member who's also working on this is actually we have a chunk picker for RuneScape 3 as well,
Hmm.
and that one is basically a clone of the chunk picker V2 for old school, just with the map is kind of changed for the RuneScape 3 map, and some features are disabled or enabled because they have a little bit different stuff. But then the data side of it, all the data in each chunk and all the tasks, those are wildly different. So um, a guy named Chunk Lee works on that stuff. I don't touch the RS3 tasks. I give them the updates that we have then whenever I make them for the old school picker, but otherwise he and I know a couple of people help him, but he's the main guy who's working on that on a week to week basis, and they've gotten quite far in being able to have their own tasks again because even though the RuneScape 3 wiki doesn't have RuneLight to help back its data, it is still pretty good data considering the amount of people that have played and still do play RuneScape 3. So their their website is looking quite good with the tasks. I know they're still working on some of those things, but yeah, so it's just me and Chunk Lee on the RuneScape 3 side basically.
That's super impressive, man. How many man hours do you think you have put into the chunk picker?
Oh, that is a tricky question and kind of one that I've intentionally not tracked. When I first
Yeah.
started this, I was like, maybe I should like just track this for fun to see what it turns out to be. But at this point, I think I probably spent more time developing features for the chunk picker or fixing bugs for it than I've put as in like time playing this account. And this account is at like over 300 days of playtime.
Mm.
So I mean, thousands of hours, maybe tens of thousands at
Yeah.
this point. There's lots of little things. The big things take a while, but the little things like they just take up like an hour every day or something. But it's like every day for 5 years more or less. I mean, obviously I go on vacations and I get busy with work and real life and whatever else. So sometimes I'm less on it, but pretty consistently across a bit less than 5 years. It's kind of almost every week. I mean, if you look at like the GitHub page for the chunk picker, you can see pretty consistent like pushes to fixing stuff or adding new features like across many years. So I'm kind of glad that I don't track it because I feel like that would make me evaluate like am I spending the right amount of time on this versus now I'm just kind of I'm enjoying what I've created. I'm enjoying still working on it in a smaller quantity as I'm fixing stuff and not adding like big features anymore for the most part. And I enjoy being at that point where I could feel like I've contributed a useful thing to a community that I really enjoy being a part of, and I don't need to worry about like have I spent too much time on this or like trying to track like the like amount of time I could have spent doing something else in my life.
Sure.
Fun. I've just enjoyed this, you know.
Yeah, yeah. No, totally. The I know using it, it feels very much like playing leagues. Like it's got that vibe for me, and that is something that I have been so impressed by. The way that just the tool that you've developed has made for me personally such a fun experience. And I know I mean, how many people have made maps? Do you know offhand?
So offhand, no, but I did pull it before this talk that we're having. I did pull up some stats on it, and as far as maps created, there's been a minimum of 60,000 maps created total, and that's a minimum because back when we were only using three-letter map codes, I used to go through and clear some of the empty maps when we were reaching kind of the limit of available map codes. I don't do that anymore, but at the very least, probably add a couple hundred, maybe two or 3,000 to that, but probably 60, 65,000 maps total. I mean, most of those are not uh, actively used. I mean, like we have just under 500 people in the clan right now. I think that's a pretty good estimate of the amount of people that are actively playing a chunk account because some of those people in the clan are inactive as of recently, and some people aren't in the clan. So I think probably around 600 people actively playing a chunk account right now is within the ballpark of it, and obviously that's much less than 60,000. But I mean, you'd be surprised, like out of the 60,000 maps that were created, like 64% of those maps are maps that have at least one chunk unlocked. So it wasn't just like someone creating a map and doing absolutely nothing with it and just getting rid of it, or like bots creating the map or something like that. So it's maps that people have actually used at least one thing on, and like so 64% have unlocked one chunk at least, 32% total have unlocked two or more chunks, and 48% have rolled a chunk using the roll chunk button in the past. So basically 30,000 maps about have at least rolled a chunk before. Now whether that's a real person rolling for their real chunk account or just someone making a map to see how the website works, or just messing around with it, or like I know lots of people in the clan have said they like forget the password to their old maps, so they just make a new one. So like it's a bunch of that stuff. But I mean, 60,000, that's a lot of maps.
That's a lot. Yeah. I mean, especially for a small project or a side project, and I don't want to say small, a side project that you were doing for fun just to help out. Like that's a ton of people that you have given an experience to that probably, I know for me personally, would not have sought out without it.
Yeah, it's I've had people say that before, and I'm really honored that people say that. That saying that they wouldn't have made a chunk account if the website didn't exist, and that I mean, it makes me feel really proud of what I've created because I didn't go into this trying to necessarily do anything. I think I just happened to be around at the right time with the right skill sets and the right motivation to want to do this again as a personal project that I just wanted to see if I could replicate, you know, the ability to make this website from the first one with some fun features that I was adding, and it's turned into this. But I mean, huge to feel like it's been that big an impact. I know that the same has been said about the region locker plugin, which has existed for even longer than the chunk picker has, and like RuneScape 3 doesn't has that as a disadvantage that they don't have RuneLite and plugins to be able to draw borders on their map and be able to like darken locked chunks or anything like that. And I think it definitely affects them. I don't know how many more people would be willing to do a chunk account on RuneScape 3 out of people that enjoy RuneScape 3 or are willing to try it. But I know that it definitely helps, and obviously the chunk picker has helped because people have said so, and I do feel very happy to hear people say that, even though I like I said, I do get frustrated a while ago when people would say like, oh, the tasks tell me to do this, so I'm only doing this. But I do really appreciate that people view it in that way, because to me it still feels like it's like a personal project, you know?
Yeah, no, totally. It it's it's so good. Like you really should be proud of it. And I know you have a Patreon, and I want to plug that as much as I can here. Do you mind sharing kind of what that's about?
Yeah, so I won't talk about it too much because I don't like uh, advertising myself, but I did start a Patreon when I started making videos, and I have kept it up as something that even though I haven't been making videos recently, something that people can support the work that I do on developing the website. And the amount I'll just say the amount that I get back from Patreon um, more than covers the any cost that I have in terms of physical, tangible costs of having to pay for server costs or anything like that, hosting costs, anything like that. Obviously, it doesn't pay for the time that I've put into it, but I haven't put into it time that I'm expecting to get back in any way except for the enjoyment of doing it and the satisfaction of having done it. So um, definitely, no one needs to feel obligated to support me at all or anything like that. But the people that do, um, I've been offering a perk of like being able to pick your own custom map code for people that do support at the higher tier. So it's been fun, kind of. Uh, People get more, I think, invested in their map and their series when they have like a personalized code that makes them feel like uh, they have something special and their account is something special, and they like being able to share that with people, with their friends, with the clan, So uh, if you do have a chunk account and that is interesting to you, you can always check that out, but definitely don't feel obligated to. It's just a
Oh,
fun little perk that I like to offer people.
I think you should feel obligated. If you're listening to this at this point, you should feel obligated. But yeah, I know. I think I I definitely think you are someone who is should be supported, and the amount of time, the amount of accessibility that you offer for people to ask you questions and the support you give, like you're doing the work of like a full studio on this side project that you're doing with like the development side, the debugging, the helping people out, the tech support, and all that stuff. You're doing so much, and so if people can, I think you are a good person who deserves it.
Well, I appreciate that. I definitely think that, if you have a favorite creator out there, especially some of the smaller creators that are trying to get their series off the ground and you appreciate them, want them to keep doing what they do, definitely support them first. But I'll appreciate anyone that does end up supporting me at any point in time. I do really appreciate it, and it makes me feel a lot of love from this community, which I feel like again, like I said, I feel like I just happened in on the right time, but it's a community that I hold very dearly to me. It's been a big part of my life the last 5 years or so, and I think it'll continue to be for at least a couple years more. I
Yeah.
can't see me leaving the community anytime soon.
Do you think chunkman style chunk has any more room to evolve, or do you think we've kind of hit the apex there?
I don't want to sound too much like doom and gloom and pessimistic on this, but I feel like we've reached maybe a peak for the popularity and maybe not innovativeness,
Mm.
innovity. I don't know. I don't know if we've run out of innovation to do, but I think as far as popularity, we're pretty close to the peak just based on kind of seeing the people that are coming into the clan and leaving from the clan and the amount of chunk series that are starting and ones that are ending or still continuing for the longer series. I feel like we I mean, there's a lot of people that have either tried a chunk account or currently play a chunk account or watch a chunk series. I mean, some of the biggest creators out there right now in the chunk community are major parts of the old school content creation scene. I mean, it's not like everyone's doing it, but like, I think most people know what you're talking about when you say chunk account if they've had any interaction with the broader content creation community of RuneScape. And I mean that's exciting, and I want this community to continue strong. I do think that there's the amount of people that have tried playing a chunk account because of how popular it is now, and the amount of content creators that have done it and talked about it and how popular they are. I think most people that want to try a chunk account have probably already tried one or are currently doing one now. And because of that, I don't think that the community is going to have another explosion overnight or something like that. I mean, obviously, let's say you have like someone like Bodhi, like create a chunk account. Obviously, you're going to have a ton more people play it then. But I'm assuming, barring something like that, where an already big name is trying something like a chunk account out, I think in general, we're kind of at the peak of where the amount of people who are playing chunk accounts are, and personally I'm fine with that. The community is plenty big. I mean, as far as the clan, we're constantly running out of room to fit the people that want to be in it in the clan, and they're all chunk accounts. So either Jagex needs to expand that, or we need to not grow any bigger. I'd be happy to be proven wrong. I would love more people to join in, and if people have thoughts about joining the clan as a chunk account or playing a chunk account in general or having a series where you play a chunk account, I definitely recommend it. It's a great experience, and maybe there's more innovation at the very least, like the the stuff that you're doing, the stuff that Chunk Evil is doing, the stuff that, like I mentioned, Ectograss is doing. There's definitely innovation to be had when it comes to like offshoot snowflakes that are subsets of a chunk account or chunk based stuff. Um, and I hope that continues because I, I think that has the best route forward. Seeing interesting chunk accounts that are unique and aren't the same extreme, supreme, vanilla, and variations rule set. I think that has a lot of interest. Maybe that's just because I've seen like 60 or 70 chunk accounts on YouTube and watch them go through their stuff, but except for the best ones, they're starting to feel a little samey to me. Like
Yeah.
the best ones are still really good. Like I really enjoy watching Limpwort because of the bluntness of his style and just the how homegrown it feels, I think. And like I love what Josh's in gaming is doing. I think like his editing chops and his storytelling ability is like amazing, and it captivates my interest every time he puts out an episode. And like I'm enjoying what Frey is doing, and I'm enjoying what Hapri is doing. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm enjoying what a lot of the smaller creators do with their abilities, and the amount of subscribers that some people have is criminal. But when it comes to the standard chunk account, I think it's starting to get to a point for me, at least, that it's feeling a little samey. And I'm sure people that are just joining the community feel differently, but I mean, you tell me. You feel like you've been watching for a while, but
Mm.
you've only started playing a chunk account semi recently. So how do you feel about the community and its growth?
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page with you. I think I was I was thinking about my Dead Man series, and I realized it was like a man series, right? Dead Man, Chunk Man, Bronze Mode Man. I was like, oh, that's
Mhm.
probably too many man in the title, and I think that's when it starts layering so much is when you start reaching the end of the innovation, and then something new will come along. Because I believe it's fair to say that chunkman is kind of an offshoot, or the at least the audience or the interest is an offshoot from like swampletics and region locked, and it kind of
Yeah,
took that energy and went here. And I think eventually, I don't think it'll happen soon, but eventually that will shift into something new. And I have no idea what that's going to be or when that would happen, but I would
yeah. Well,
expect the
if you
evolution.
could predict what that's going to be, you could be very popular.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everyone's kind of waiting for that next thing. Like area locked was a big thing, and I feel like a chunk account is kind of the natural progression to something like that, where you get to a smaller area than an area locked, but it's also got the advantages of being able to expand your area and uh, progress your account naturally to further stages and still be in weird, like wacky grinds and training methods like an area locked account would have, which I think is an advantage it has over something like a tile man, um, which is kind of like a chunk account, except because you're like choosing where you're going, you can route yourself to be doing pretty normal things at a certain point in your account. But I am curious what the next thing will be in terms of the a big thing like that, like a snowflake type account, because
Yeah.
I've enjoyed watching snowflake accounts for years at this point. I mean, I remember when Caveman Only was posting his updates on Reddit before there was even a series. I don't know if he was the first like area lock snowflake, but he was one of the early adopters, if he wasn't the earliest. And um, I mean, still watching a bunch of snowflakes that I enjoy now, and I can't wait to see other things. I mean, people still innovating, like doing cool things with random snowflake accounts, but I do wonder if there will be a big thing like a chunk account or the general idea of an area locked account, or if there's just kind of going to be smaller things that now that we know what a snowflake is, there's no like huge new thing that being made. It's just like individual accounts that are individually interesting, like a chest locked account
Mm.
or whatever like that. It could be interesting, or like settled series that's doing. It's not really a snowflake, but it's like an extreme account where you can't take damage. It's like that's a unique, interesting concept for a single account, but I don't think that's going to be a widely adopted thing that's going to be like the next wave of everyone's doing it, you know?
Yeah. 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 I think thinking about kind of RuneScape as a game and the focus they've put on development in the last couple of years, I think has kind of slowed down the need maybe, or the push to come up with a new thing, because for a long time it was pretty stagnant. And then you had area locked and then chunkman and stuff like that to take this game that everyone or people who play love and reignite that passion. And with like Valamore and all this other stuff that's coming out constantly, it's kind of keeping people busy from sitting there like, oh, what can I do differently? But I think once development, if development slows down, I think that's when we're going to see something else pop up.
Yeah, I definitely think I agree with you in terms of the reason we have Snowflake accounts is because people got bored, right?
Mm.
And if people aren't bored with how things are developing currently, if they're occupied, then there's less reason to need to create things like Snowflake accounts, which Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with how Jagex is generally developing things. I'm excited for the updates that they release. I'm excited for Sailing to come out, even though I didn't vote for Sailing when that vote came. But I have full trust that they'll make something that is interesting to the wider audience of the game and will engage me to want to play what they release for the next couple of years at the very least.
Yeah. Yeah, sailing's going to be really interesting with chunk accounts. What that's going to
Yeah,
do to
I'm looking forward to that because it's going to be a big change. I honestly, there's a chance that having sailing added ruins chunk accounts for some people, just because there's a lot more space that's going to be opened up as soon as sailing gets added. Like we're gonna triple the amount of chunks that are potentially like unlockable.
yeah.
And I do wonder if that'll have a negative impact on people, because it becomes like not restricted enough. Like it's kind of like you're playing like an area locked account in Mauritania, and then they release an update that says, uh, we're gonna add Misthalin and Asgarnia to Mauritania, and the whole thing is now called Mauritania. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, like yeah, that is cool. I got a lot more content now, but it does feel like I've kind of removed a bunch of limitations for myself now that I have more to do.
Yeah. Yeah, cuz like it's easy when you're landlocked, but when you add the water, it's like, well, yeah, the pier's right there, so I should be able to get on that boat. Well, now that I'm on the boat, I'm in the ocean. So what's preventing me from going to the other side of the map now? And it like really makes things murky on where your line should be or what you should be allowed to do.
Yeah, I think it's also like when you get to the late stage chunk accounts, which is very few people at this point. I mean, especially when you have an extreme account, it's like nobody at this point. But as a vanilla chunk account with every chunk unlocked on my map, it's you're basically playing an Iron Man. I mean, we're here in Dark Meyer killing Vyres. Like this is end game kind of stuff for a chunk account because you're basically a late game Iron Man by the time you unlock all chunks. And at that point, you're almost not playing a chunk account. And I think that's something that is going to eventually be a problem for people like Limpwort and Verf that are playing extreme accounts because eventually they're going to have most of their skills in the 90s or 99 even, and they're going to roll a new chunk, and like 90% of the chunks they're going to roll are going to be nothing chunks.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that will end their series or if they'll find a way to continue making it interesting. And I do wonder if sailing will do something similar to that for other chunk accounts that are not extreme, but just rolling a bunch of chunks in a row can get boring if you do it too often, and it can lose the I don't know how to describe it. It loses some of the impact of rolling chunks, which loses a lot of the uniqueness of being a chunk account and having a series that is interesting and captivating.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because the restrictions are something you can push against, and that's where the game is, right? You're like, how far can I shove this wall? Can I move it any? Can I make this work in my favor? And if you're just like, there's nothing to push against, there's not much of a game left.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll have to see how that turns out, both for sailing and as more extreme accounts get into that later game. I mean,
Yeah.
Frey has a long way to go, but he's probably one of the next in line in terms of potentially running out of things. As you train your skills up, one of the big things that you're losing out on is new unlocking new skills that you have to train when you unlock a new chunk. And I think that unlocking a new skill is probably one of the like craziest feelings in a chunk account where suddenly you have access to a pickaxe and now everything changes, or suddenly you have access to a small fishing net and everything changes.
Yeah.
I mean, you run out of that as you run out of skills to unlock though. So we'll have to see how that goes. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to it. Like, I'm looking forward to see what they'll do. I'm sure someone will find a way to make it interesting, but I'm worried about others that struggle with that.
yeah, yeah. I'd really like to see someone do like a reverse chunk account where even if they start with one and get the whole map and then pare it back down and start recreating those restrictions somewhat. But I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, you need some sort of unique series. I know there's been some series in the past that like some people would unlock chunks based on like total level or something. So like every 5 total levels, they'd unlock a new chunk or something rather than following like the strict task structure. But if they died in the chunk or something happened that they considered like a forfeit as their punishment, they would like lose one of the chunks they unlocked. And I
Hmm.
think something like that is interesting to have something that you used to have unlocked and then losing it. I mean that's kind of what you're doing with your series to an extent, whereas you have content, you are able to experience it and do it, but only for a certain period of time, and then most of the time you lose it again,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, yeah, it goes away, which is it's hard to remember. And like sometimes I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. I was like, no, I can't. Like I just I went through um what's I can't remember right next to Canifis, that where the Ragbone and Man is.
that is, oh, limestone mine. What's it
Yeah,
called?
yeah,
Who knows? Whatever.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't matter. But I didn't have my pickaxe on me. Like I carried that thing in every chunk, and then I got killed and lost it, and I forgot I didn't have it, and I was like, oh, I can unlock this one, but I could not.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing about yours, like having to keep stuff with you so you can take full advantage of new chunks that you unlock. I do think that's a very unique restriction or incentive that you have in your series that is very unique to a series like yours. And having like a unique, not just a unique gimmick where you're rolling every hour, but a unique thing that you have to do that no one else is having to do, like that helps a lot to make your account very unique, or make anyone's account very unique if you have that special thing. You know, especially to separate yourself if you're in a community that's a larger community, all doing very similar things.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's can be really tough sometimes, but
Yeah,
the
especially when you're locked in the wilderness, right?
yeah, yeah, that's been stressful.
Yeah, on this account, I just did like a bunch of wilderness stuff, and I've like when I first went in there, it's like just deathly afraid of it. And I feel like I've gotten more used to it now. But I mean, on a random account with like random stats and gear like you have, it's like you can never rest. I mean,
No,
you're just gonna
yeah,
be hunted down at some point randomly, and it's gonna suck, and it's gonna happen again. You know.
yeah. I just posted the video today of me getting PK'd for the first time in the wilderness, and that really set me back for quite a while.
Yeah, I can imagine. What's your? I'm less familiar with your series. What's your ruling on if you die and leave your chunks because of that?
Yeah, so I started as a hardcore,
Yeah.
and that death, I didn't reset the chunks or the tasks, but I reset back in Lumbridge. So I started rolling again. But now that I'm just an Iron Man, I can go back to my death. And I did consider going back to Lumbridge every time I died and starting over, but I thought, I knew myself that I would use that to get out of bad spots. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to even give myself that option. Because like if I get deep in the wilderness, I'll be like, oh no, I died to a dragon on accident. I'm back in Lumbridge, and I knew I would hate that, and so I just go right back to wherever I died.
Yeah, I think not even having the option to like bring into question whether a death was accidental or not is probably for the best.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to build the rules as much as I can to keep myself from not cheating, because obviously if it's in the rules, it's not cheating, but like where it just feels cheap. I want to make it feel like I earned whatever I get.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, man, I super appreciate all the time. I've kept you way longer than I've asked you if you were available, but it has been such a great time. Where can people find you, contact you? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so like mentioned before, the YouTube is there, although a bit dormant. Feel free to check it out. That's just if you search Source Chunk on YouTube, you'll find me, or Ideal One Chunkman, you'll find that too. Um, and hopefully they'll come back at some point. But for now, it's in a good state where there's like 15 episodes that you can watch through that lead to a good conclusion and some really good routing in that series. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. But otherwise, I don't really have anything to promote necessarily. But if you have a problem with the chunk picker or want to talk to me about it, um, I mean, feel free to reach out to me on Discord and or join the Chunk Chat server. We're happy to have more people join the server or join the clan in game. And if you're a Chunk account, we'd love for you to be part of the community and join us. And if you don't have a clan that you're part of already or want more friends, the clan and the Discord server are both super supportive of everyone and all supportive of each other in all of our individual grinds, and it really helps keep the motivation alive. So if you're doing one, highly recommend joining, and I'm sure I'll see you around if you do join.
Yeah, I this is my I think fifth clan that I've been a part of, and it is so different than any other clan I've been in. It is so welcoming, and like everyone has been cool. I don't think I've seen, at least personally, I'm sure there is some, but I don't think I've seen any drama. I don't think I've seen anyone snap at each other or do anything crazy. Like it's been,
Yeah, like as a moderator of a clan, it's like obviously I'm dealing with that stuff at the end of the day, but I'm thankfully haven't had to deal with much of that at all. But
yeah,
I honestly I wish I could have stayed as just the guy who is the tech guy who makes the chunk picker and not the moderator guy who has to deal with the drama
sure,
sometimes. But
yeah,
I'm happy that 99% of the people here are very cool, and the 1% that aren't either become cool or they leave.
yeah,
So very happy to have the community that we do have. They're so cool.
yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, if you play Chunk account, you should definitely join. You should also go to Source Chunk Patreon, subscribe there if you can, help them out. And again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.